Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Darden, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today on Navy Sports Central. I'm your host, and this is the official podcast of the Navy Sports Nation, where we take a deeper dive into Navy sports. Today, we're going to take a look to see how Navy managed to knock off Central Florida for the second year in a row. That was a gutsy road win against a team that was favored by 16.5 points, by the way. The Mids also earned another Patriot League Championship since we last spoke and came very close to pulling down a second one this weekend. And in our deep dive segment, we'll be joined by a returning guest who will take us through the Navy Sprint Football Team's championship season. All that plus our question of the day is coming up, so don't go anywhere. We've got lots to talk about. All right, it is great to have you with us, everyone. Whether you are a returning listener or catching us for the first time, thanks for making us part of your day. I wanted to start off by taking a look at exactly how the Mids were able to knock off Central Florida last weekend. Keep in mind that this is the second year in a row they've done that, and on both occasions, the spread was 16.5 points in favor of the Golden Knights. So let's go ahead and take a look at how the game broke down by the numbers. With respect to explosiveness, UCF won that one easily. They averaged 5.5 yards per play, which was over 1.5 yards better than Navy, who came in at about 3.9 yards per play. So that was really no surprise considering the kind of quick strike offense that Central Florida has. Now, as it relates to efficiency, which, as you recall, is a measure of the team's ability to stay on schedule when they're executing their offense, that was basically even. The Mids were at 41.6%, while UCF was just barely a half a percentage point behind at 41.1%. So we can pretty much consider that one a wash. And the same thing goes for starting field position. That was even as well, with both teams beginning their drives at about their own 26-yard line on average. But where Navy started to separate themselves was by doing a better job of scoring once they got inside the Golden Knights' 40-yard line. They were 3 for 3 and got all 17 of their points once they got inside that zone. UCF was also 3 for 3, but the difference there was they only got 2 field goals and a touchdown, which was basically the difference in the game. And tying right into that stat was turnovers. The Mids were a +2 in that department. You'll recall that there was that interception at the end of the first half, and then the fumble forced by John Marshall that the defense recovered, leading to Bijan Nichols' 45-yard field goal. So Navy came out on top in those two critical factors, those being finishing drives and turnovers. And what I'm finding out is that specific to this year's team, of the 5 metrics that we look at, we can almost just toss out 3 of them, okay? With the type of offense that the team runs, it all comes down to finishing drives and ball security. So if the Mids come out on top in any of the other 3, that's just going to be window dressing. Certainly, when you look at efficiency, that does come into play a little bit. But if the offense is getting inside their opponent's 40-yard line consistently and scoring touchdowns on most of those drives, their efficiency wouldn't be all that horrible anyway. So what I'm trying to say is they can afford to give up a percentage point or 2 in that category as long as they take good care of the ball and they can finish their drives consistently by scoring touchdowns. Okay, that's a look at the analytics. So now let's check out a couple of the outstanding performances. On offense, Dabo Fofana had another terrific game. He picked up 114 yards on 20 carries, so that's good for about 5.7 yards per carry. I will tell you that his speed is impressive, but what I like just as much is his balance. It is really tough for a defender to knock him down on the first try. Now, at the beginning of the year, I predicted that Fofana would have at least one 50-yard run. He hasn't hit that number yet, but he has broken off a 46 and 47-yarder so far. That one for 46 yards last Saturday led to Navy's first touchdown, and he scored on his 47-yard run earlier this year in the win over Tulsa. So maybe he doesn't get a 50-yard score against Army, but for my money, 2 runs of over 45 yards and a touchdown is worth one 50-yard score. So, there you go. On defense, the conversation is even easier. It begins and ends with the name John Marshall. The UCF offense seemed to have absolutely no idea where he would be coming from the entire game. The senior defensive captain was a one-man wrecking machine, no doubt. He had 10 total tackles, 7 of those were solo tackles, 4 of those were sacks, and he forced a fumble on one of those sacks that led to a field goal that eventually won the game. I can't even remember the last time I saw a performance on defense like that. And by the way, those 4 sacks were a new individual record, and it also gave the Navy defense 32 on the season, which is another record. Overall, just an incredible effort by a Navy team that picked up its 6th win over a top 25 ranked opponent since Ken Niumatalolo became the head coach in December 2007. Now it's time to get ready for Army. The Black Knights will likely enter the game with a 5-6 record because they play UMass, who is like 1-10 next. They play them on Saturday, I think. That means a win by the Mids will prevent Army from finishing even on the year, and I'm pretty sure the Black Knights wouldn't be eligible for a bowl game anyway if they win, because they do have those 6 wins, but 2 of them are against FCS opponents, Villanova and Colgate. And to qualify for a bowl game, I think the NCAA only counts 1 FCS win towards the 6 total. But to tell you the truth, I couldn't even care less about that. I just want the Mids to play even better than they have the last 2 weeks on offense, and then bring that disruptive pressure defense to Philadelphia on December the 10th. If they can do that, I think their chances of singing second are pretty good. It's going to be a tough fight, no doubt about that, which means it'll come down to which team executes better under pressure. Okay, before we move on, I did want to congratulate Navy's 3rd Patriot League Championship team this sports season, and of course that would be Navy men's soccer. The Mids got it done with defense and an opportunistic offense. In the championship game, freshman A.J. Schutz scored on a really crazy goal in the 83rd minute, and that was enough to beat American University 1-0. Schutz was about 3 to 5 yards off that left goal post along the end line there with practically no angle at all. And he got quite a bit on the shot, because what ended up happening was the ball actually deflected off of a defender, off of that defender who got his leg out there, and then it bounced back and caromed off of Schutz again, and the angle of the shot was changed. So the goalie had already committed to the initial shot, and by the time it came back off the defender's leg, hit Schutz again, and then got redirected back towards the goal, it was on a different angle, and it was just outside the goalie's outstretched hand. So it ended up sneaking by him and into the right side of the goal for the 1-0 advantage, and the defense made that stand up. That gave the Mids their first Patriot League championship since 2013. In the NCAA tournament, they ended up drawing the Georgetown Hoyas, which is always a really tough team to square off against, especially in the first round. And the Hoyas were able to kind of basically shut the Mids down, and they won that match 2-0. But it capped off another strong year for Coach O'Donohue and his guys, so congratulations to the Navy men's soccer team. That was one of their primary goals, is to win the Patriot League Championship this year, and sure enough, they got it done. And finally, the volleyball team nearly pulled off an incredible win in the Patriot League final against Colgate. The Mids entered the tournament as the number 3 seed a week ago, and they beat American to reach the semifinals against Army. You'll remember that the Black Knights already owned 2 wins against Coach Labrador this season, but Navy was up to the challenge this time. Not only did they have to win the 4th set to extend the match, but they had to fight off 2 match points in the 5th set before Jordan Llewellyn came up with a block to clinch the win and get the Mids into the Patriot League final. Now, the one thing that's really tough for a team to do is to gather itself after a big emotional win like that and come back out the next day to compete for a championship. And unfortunately, the Mids couldn't get going early, and they quickly found themselves down in an 0-2 hole going into the 3rd set. In fact, they were never even really in the 2nd set, losing that one 25-10. But the 3rd set was tight all the way. Then the Raiders got to match point twice at 25-24 and 26-25, but they couldn't close things out. Navy fought back to go up 27-26, and on their only set point opportunity, Jamie Llewellyn and Anna Kleemeyer teamed up on a block to put it away. That gave the Mids some momentum, and they used it to win the 4th set 25-22, but they just ran out of gas from that point on, and they dropped the 5th set 15-9. Now, even though they didn't complete that comeback against the top-seeded Raiders, it marked the end of another solid season for Navy volleyball. They have several key players coming back next year, including Jordan and Jamie Llewellyn, Anna Kleemeyer, and Maggie Bodman. So look for them to be knocking on the door again in 2023. Okay, our deep dive segment is coming up next, where we are going to be joined by a returning guest to talk about the Navy Sprint football team's championship season. Stay with us. All right, we are back here at Navy Sports Central, and now it's time to break down the Navy Sprint football team's championship season. And to do that, we're going to be welcoming back Jim Kenneally, who is the father of Navy Sprint football offensive lineman Ryan Kenneally. Jim, thanks so much for joining us again. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks. It's great to be back. It's great to talk about what was just an amazing season, an amazing group of young men who from day one came out firing on all cylinders and brought home another Navy Sprint championship.
All right. Yeah. So, and to that point, I wanted to kind of go ahead and turn the mic over to you with regard to just kind of giving us a thumbnail sketch of how the season went in general. And I'm not saying you got to talk about every single game, but maybe there's about 2 or 3 pivotal games out there, or maybe even two or three pivotal moments during the season that kind of defined what the team was all about and what allowed them to be so successful. So, Mike's yours, and fire away.
Sure, I appreciate it. When you there's a saying, and it's very cliche, but when you hear people say it really was true with this team. And really what you want to do is you want to focus on yourself as a team. So I'm not worried about another team. I'm not worried about what this team is going to do with respect to scheme. When you take care of yourself, that's when you really get to be very good, because there are easy ways to make adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Navy is very fortunate that they've got great athletes from top to bottom because of the physical mission of the Naval Academy and all the work that they put in. And don't get me wrong, they put in great work, but they were able to wear teams down. The focus of the football team this year was run the football with an excellent running back in Alex Tata, an excellent offensive line. But top to bottom, the team really had some very good athletes, and then they played very good defense. And so if you can run the football consistently and play good defense and have very, very solid special teams,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to be very successful. So if I had to categorize this team with one word, I would use the word consistent.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's a boring word, but from day one to the last game, they were just very consistent. They didn't panic if they got down by a score. They consistently ran the football, ran it for 3, 4, 5 yards, which enabled them to really dominate some games that could have been closer had there been issues with the weather. There were issues with the weather this year.
Mm-hmm.
They played Mansfield. There was a 50-mile-an-hour wind, right? So you're not going to be able to throw the ball. You cannot throw the ball in a 50-mile-an-hour wind.
Right.
They played Caldwell, and Caldwell was a very good football team. And, that was a team that I think, at least as an outsider looking in, I look and I see that team matches up very well with Army and with Navy with respect to athletes. And they were very physical and fast, but weather played a factor. It was raining, so they couldn't throw the ball as much, and they put the ball on the ground. We did not. We ran the ball, ran it very consistently with Alex and Brandon Atwood, who was a kind of the secret sauce, a quarterback that can run the football. He was a very, very strong runner.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, we ran the ball very well, didn't turn the ball over a lot, played very good defense, and had excellent special teams.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, the punter, Radford Wyrick, could punt. He could punt for the big boys.
Is that
He's
right?
that good.
Yeah.
He is that good of a punter. And Michael Golden, our kicker, consistently, we just did the same thing. That was the formula every game. Run the football, play good defense, and win the special teams battle. And if you do that, you're going to be successful.
Right. Yeah, I saw a handful of games that they were able to get on ESPN. Well, actually, it was the 2 Army games on ESPN Plus, the championship game, and of course the first time they played him on back in September. And just thinking back to that game, the first matchup for the Star, it's interesting because when I look at those two teams, they have a lot of offensive. Firepower is maybe not the right word because Navy just runs, right? And I don't, Army, I got the sense that they threw the ball a little bit more. But what I did know is that, Army throughout the course of the season, at least going into the championship game, they're averaging 45 points a game. Navy wasn't that far behind at about 37. But when they get together, it really is a slugfest. I mean, they tend to just play in a phone booth is what I was noticing. So let's go back to that first game and talk about that a little bit. And what were some of your takeaways from that first Army game?
So the takeaway from the first game is that I think that Navy, if I had to point to one game where Navy didn't play their best, I would point to the Army game. Now, a lot of that has to do with Army and being a very good opponent.
Sure.
But, defensively, we came firing out right away, right? I mean, they fumble the kickoff. We get the ball. We score right away. then they come back and now all of a sudden now we've got a pick six and there's 7 minutes to go in the first quarter and we're already up 14-0.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you take a look at the Army Navy scores, you're like 14-0. That's like 50-0.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, how are they going to come back and do it? But I tell you, they did a very good job of sticking to their game plan.
Mm-hmm.
Throwing the football, little passes here, there, running that little bubble screen, slant behind it, we like to call it a pop behind where you fake it and it looks like the quarterback's going to run, and the flanker just sits behind the linebacker and dumping the ball off to the flanker.
Mm-hmm.
They did a very good job of executing their game plan, and we in the first half, once we got. We were up 14-0. I believe we kind of settled down just a little bit. And we had 4 drives that had major penalties.
Oh, my goodness,
that caused us to miss big gains and then come back and then ultimately end up punting the football.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the difference between the first game and the second game is we really cleaned up the penalties from the first game.
Right.
But I will tell you, Army made some nice adjustments too.
Uh-huh.
In terms of what they were trying to do and then what they saw us doing. We looked a little different on defense the second game, and I know we'll get into the game specifically, but they have very good coaches, and they saw what we were doing, and it was an excellent chess match
right
on Sunday. But we countered back, they countered back, and then we countered back again, and ultimately we did what we do. We ran the football.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't turn it over. We limited our penalties. We won the field position battle with our punter, and we ultimately wore them down and won the game.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing I do recall around the first game, and I remember when, because I saw part of the game and then I had to break away to do something, and I came back and I checked the final score of this first game back in September, and I saw, 27-13. I mean, they handled them pretty easy. But what I didn't realize until the end was that 2 of those scores were defensive scores, right? And so offensively, you're talking, okay, it was just as tight as it always was. And the defense was able to kind of put them over the top. So can you talk a little bit about that in terms of the defensive impact on the games this year versus, say, last year?
I tell you what, man, first of all, yes, it was 27-13, but we let them drive like 95 yards and score with no time, very little time left on the scoreboard. So I think they had like over 400 yards of total offense, but 95 yards of it was when the game was 27.
Got it. It was just garbage time. Okay. Yeah.
So, and that's okay. But I tell you, the defense, the one thing about a Jim McNeil defense and the kids that we have is they're not happy just getting the turnover.
Mm-hmm.
They understand scoop and score, and they want to score, and they realize just how demoralizing it is when you can pick up a fumble and run 75 yards for a touchdown.
Right.
We scored, I think, like 4 touchdowns this year on defense, on either pick sixes or picking up fumbles and running them back.
Yeah.
I mean, the Caldwell game was 7-6. They were going to kick the extra point. We blocked the extra point and ran it back 98 yards for 2 points. So now instead of 7-7, now it's 9-6. But in a game with a team like Caldwell, now they have to kick a field goal in bad weather conditions, even if the game stays that way.
Right.
They do a very good job of all of them running to the football, and then once the turnover occurs, to turn into offensive players and block and get their man into the end zone.
Right.
That's a special trait, and it's a learned trait. You really have to focus on it. Like, I want the ball in the end zone, and Jim does a great job with it.
Right. Okay, I tell you what, we're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, we're going to take a really good look at the championship game, and Jim is going to help us break that down. Thanks for staying with us here on Navy Sports Central. Carl Darden here with you, and I'm joined by Jim Kenneally, who has come back to help take us through the Navy Sprint football team's championship season. Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about the season in general. Now let's focus a little bit more on the Army game itself that was just played, obviously, on Sunday for the championship. And I tuned that in, and I noticed right away. I mean, the very first play, I think Army had like a run for like 21 yards, and I'm thinking, okay, let's see what happens on the next play. And it wasn't as big a gain, but it was close to it. And so clearly there's something happening there that they had figured out that where they allowed them to move the ball pretty well. Now I don't recall. I have to I got the stats all here, and I'm looking here. So the very first drive they had, it was a punt, but they scored a touchdown on the second drive. So what were you seeing as far in terms of what they were doing offensively that was really kind of giving the Mids some trouble on defense?
So, I don't know if it was, we came out with this, I would call it like almost like a prevent with with two wide defensive ends and a nose man. And then everyone else was standing up.
I did notice that.
And to stand up about 5 yards and 5 yards from the line of scrimmage, right? Typically, that's not the way that we play. We're a little closer and we're very aggressive, especially on the ends. And we've got some guys inside that can swallow up the blocks so that linebackers can run. And whether it's a 3-man front or 4-man front, but if you get people inside and those people can take up blockers, like I said, the linebackers can run and tackle.
Right.
We lined up and it looked like I would call it cover 8, where it was an umbrella all the way at the top, and then linebackers were back, and everybody was backed off of the receivers. Like we were expecting them to throw the football. And I think they came out and said, okay, let's settle into the game. And so they ran the ball for 21 yards, right? I mean, they were going to run the ball first play. Let's run it. So they ran 21 yards. And then I believe the next play was a bubble screen. But what happens is when you're back and you've got offensive linemen there. So you got 5 offensive linemen. You've got 2 wide ends on defense, which means you don't really even have to block them. Now you have almost 5 guys blocking 4 or 3 guys, the nose man and a couple of linebackers. Well, if you give them that, they're going to take it. They're a good team. So what happened was they started the counter with that little bubble screen because we were playing back, which meant they're immediately going to get 5 or 6 yards, and running the football up the middle because we're expecting pass and they're running, and now it's 5-on-3. It's a problem.
Right.
And ultimately what they did was they came back then with 2 tight ends. So now was it not only 5-on-3 with 2 tackles, 2 guards in the center, but now they had 2 tight ends. And a power back and then the tailback. And sometimes the quarterback would fake, so it would look like an ISO with 7-on-5 or 4. Well, you're going to get a lot of yards.
Right.
If you have people outnumbered. And as an offensive coach, that's what you look for. You're like, where can we take numbers? Are they going to cover 3 people outside with 2? If they do, we're going to throw the ball. If they try to, move everybody outside and they only have 3 or 4 or 5 in the box, we're going to run the ball right down their throat. I mean, that's the way that you coach offense. You don't coach plays, you coach concepts. All right, how many people are in the box? How many people are out of the box? Well, we only had 5 people in the box and they had 7. We're going. So they were running the football. Now, I think the wind had something to do with it as well, though. Like I said, the announcer on ESPN Plus said it was breezy. The wind definitely played a factor. It was blowing from the closed end of the stadium through the tunnel. And it wasn't the 50-mile-an-hour wind that Mansfield was, but it was enough that it affected punts, it affected passes, and it affected any kicks, right? So if you are going into the wind, you're not going to really throw the ball down the field. In fact, the first touchdown to Margiota was, I think it was a 31-yard pass. But I mean, Brandon or Atwood really needed to lock and load his arm and throw that ball on a line because he was cutting the wind. Right. Typically you say, listen, the wide receiver's running, he's going to be able to fade. Just make sure the ball is on his outside shoulder, so he's the only one that can catch the ball. Man, I'm telling you, he wound up and he had to cut the wind. and Margiota made a great play on the ball, our wide receiver, in order to make the catch.
Right, right.
So what happened then in the second quarter? Right, we made some adjustments, but if you notice, we were driving the ball a little bit on offense, but again, just not finally putting things together. But in the second quarter, we did. Again, when you can run the ball consistently, we're running it for 4 or 5 yards. Now the offensive linemen are settling in. We're running the ball, and Tata and Atwood did a great job of bouncing the football. What bouncing the football means is you may be looking to run, and these guys are crashing so hard that if you take a step and bounce the ball outside, because you've got two wide receivers outside, they're running. Now you've got a nice running lane.
Mm-hmm.
So offensive linemen doing a very good job at the point of attack, but they were really trying to load the box.
Mm-hmm.
And what we were doing was bouncing the ball outside in order to make the cuts and get the yards that we needed to get in the second quarter.
Yeah.
Now, once that happened and we scored that first touchdown, we went back to what I would normally see from a defensive perspective from Navy Sprint football, which is 4 guys, and then you've got 2 outside people. Now we're going to put pressure on them. They were trying to run the ball up the middle, and then we were also, now when that the running back would go wide to try to throw a bubble screen, we were taking care of him as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it changed our mindset, right? We were sitting back, and whether or not you've got enough safeties and corners to cover, you can cover a zone. But when the front 7 are aggressive, then the back 3 or back 4 are aggressive as well.
Yeah.
And I think that was the turning point of the game. We said, okay, you scored 14 points on us. We are not going to sit back and let you do it to us again.
Right.
McNeil loves pressure, and we're like, all right, if you're going to beat us, you're going to beat us this way, but we're coming to get you.
Right.
And so that's what happened. We went back to our base defense with pressure. The defensive back made a great play on the ball, but I will tell you, it was because of the pressure too. The quarterback was throwing off of his back foot, but I know we're going to talk about the quarterbacks in a second.
Mm-hmm.
Kid made a great play. Dante Carrasco made a great play on the ball. And now we've got all the momentum, and we're running the football.
Yeah.
Very demoralizing, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I saw too. When that ball went in the air and the camera tracked it, and you could see Carrasco. I mean, he had that figured from as soon as the ball left the quarterback's hands. You could see he just bore sighted on it and just made a perfect play on the ball, snagged the ball, and went the other way. And it's so funny. I mean, you're talking about the I want to score mindset. I can't remember how many yards he gained. I think it was like about 14 or so. But the way he caught that ball, you could almost tell that it's okay. Where's the end zone? That's what he was
going to the end zone. Exactly.
But
and then we settled in, ran the football, and did what we do.
Yep.
And ran the ball right down their throat and scored a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Second half came back. We drove the football the third quarter.
Right.
We missed a field goal. We had a penalty that killed one drive, and then offensive tackle caught the ball on a bat.
I remember that. Yeah.
If he would have been down, we would have been better off. But we were playing field position.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, the fourth quarter though was one of the most entertaining quarters of football I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
Both teams.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to address the Navy. If you notice, Navy had 2 quarterbacks, and then Navy had some great playmakers.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the quarterback, McHale. Trying to remember what his last name is. Number 15 was a very good quarterback.
Oh, so we're talking Army side of the ball now.
We're talking about the Army quarterback.
Got it. Okay.
Right? And because it factored into the fourth quarter, the third and fourth quarter. So Army's quarterback, who will probably be the first team all CFL quarterback, hurt his ankle in the second quarter.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to run him on a quarterback ISO play, and I think he turned his ankle, and I think that was also a factor in that second throw because he couldn't really plant his foot to throw. So they took him out of the game, and They also had a little wide receiver, number one, who did some nice things. But he's a wide receiver, right? He's not going to throw the ball. The kid they brought in the so let's just say number one's Wildcat. He's not really quarterback. They were running
Right,
well.
right.
And then number 6 was their second quarterback, was a little shifty kid who was very, very hard to tackle. And you didn't really realize that he could throw until he was with the wind in the fourth quarter.
Right. Yeah, I did notice that. Yeah.
That guy was hard to tackle.
Uh-huh.
And so, you're trying to you use so much energy to try to get to the quarterback that you forget about the discipline that you need to have, which is, listen, the 2 middle guys, let's keep them in the pocket. But our ends were trying so hard to get to the quarterback. I think if we would have just kept him in the pocket, he would have really struggled to throw because he wasn't that tall.
That's right. Yeah.
We weren't tracking back to keep him in the cup, and he was able to get off some throws. So he really caused some problems in the fourth quarter. But I will say, in the fourth quarter is when Navy really established that they were going to be the champs.
Right.
The drive that put us up 21-14, I think, was a 14-play drive. I think maybe there were 2 passes in the drive, but we asserted our dominance on the offensive line. Tata ran very well. Vic Otero, the backup quarterback, one of the things you don't see is when we're driving to score, Tata actually came out. He was getting sick on the sideline. So we brought in Victor Otero, who's our backup. Victor Otero started as a wide receiver this year. And about the fourth game, they said, you know what, we're gonna make you a running back, because we had a couple other injuries from the other running backs that we had, and we're like, we got to be able to give Tata a break. And he did a very good job of being patient, running the football, and he did a very good job today, or on Sunday, same thing. But they ran the ball behind an experienced and physical offensive line, and ran the ball right down and scored to make it 21-14. And at that point, you're like, okay, here we go, right? And we know their quarterbacks in. Let's pin them back. Let's make them punt. And wouldn't you know it, there's the chess match, right? Make some adjustments. They start to sprint this kid out a little bit. They hit us on a wheel route, which the outside linebacker just bit. He was just like, I'm going in for the run. And the kid, who was like a tight wing, ran a wheel route, which is outside down along the sidelines. Well, I could have made that throw to that kid, and so, it still would have been a gain, down to the 5. And those things happen. So what do you do when you're a champion? They scored. Now it's 21-21 with 4.5 minutes to go. What do you do when you're a champion? You counterpunch. Here we go. Great run back by Margiotta. Again,
he always seemed to come up with a good run at just when they needed it, all throughout the season.
You know what? Special teams again. If you look, though, in the way that it was blocked, the kids did a great job to create that lane. Now we get we run the ball back to their 45-yard line. Well, now we only got to go, there's 4.5 minutes. We know we're going to get at least a field goal. But I'm telling you, man, I mean, next thing you know, we run a little scramble drill. Atwoods finds Jake Smith for a nice little gain down to their 40. We lost one on 4 on the next play. And then on the third play, we ran a play that we hadn't run all year. There's the counter punch in the chess match, right? We're Army. You know what we're going to do. We're Navy. You know what we're going to do. Well, we had not shown option all year long. Had not shown it. And wouldn't you know it, here you go. Ran a little option play. Once Tata made one cut and ran down the sidelines, nobody was going to catch him.
Yeah. And I tell you what was so impressive about that. And you're right. I mean, I had not seen option the entire game, nor in the previous Army game. So it's a really good time to roll that out. But when I saw how that play developed and the outcome, obviously being a 41-yard score, my mind immediately went back to uh, the Army Navy game 10 years ago, which was Keenan Reynolds' first, he was a freshman that
Right.
year leading the team. And in the fourth quarter at crunch time, he took the snap and he was rolling out. He was looking to pass, but then there's nothing downfield. And he had two guys going after him, and the two defenders took the exact same angle of pursuit. And he took a step back and then turned and just wheeled and went. And he ended up getting enough for a first down to continue the drive. And then they ended up scoring 2 plays later because he connected with Brandon Turner on a 49-yard reception. And then he scored from 12 yards out. But my point was, when Tata got that ball, two defenders took the exact same angle of pursuit to get to him. And as soon as he got past one, of course, he got past both of them. And, the technique there, as I understand it, is if you got two guys going for the ball, one guy goes for one guy goes for the ball carrier, the other guy goes to where he's going to be later in case the first guy misses, right?
That's right. There's a pursuit drill that you run sideline to sideline so everyone knows where they need to be. But I will tell you what set that up. We talked about it earlier in the podcast, is Brandon Atwood's ability to run the football. So they both went flat because it looked like a broken play and Brandon was running the football. Well, once he pitched the ball, that was we call it an OS moment, right? OS,
right.
There he goes. And now they both look like they took the wrong angle, but the angle that they were taking was to tackle the quarterback because they had never seen an option before.
Very, very good point. Yeah. And only a coach would have been able to point that out because I don't have that kind of eye for what's going on technically. But yeah, so thank you for explaining that. But yeah, and sure, and the guy who was calling the game, I think is it Scott Wyckoff? I mean, he saw it too. As soon as he saw, Tata get past that second defender, he already called it. He said, and Tata's gone, and sure enough, 3 seconds later, he was in the end zone. So very good. Now, I did want to jump back to the third touchdown, only because of the 2-point conversion, because up until this time, I hadn't really been focusing on, what was going on in the offensive line with Ryan. So I said, okay, well, let me just kind of check out what's going on here on this 2-point conversion. And I don't know exactly what play they called, but one thing I did notice was that he came up and he executed a perfect seal block. He sealed his guy to the inside, and I forget who it was that ran the 2-point conversion in, but he had just a wide open lane. And it was partly because of Ryan was able to seal that guy so effectively. So that was the one thing I did note, during the game in terms of, what was going on with him.
Ryan saved his one of his best games for last. He has battled that defensive tackle from West Point for 4 years, and the kid could not have been more complimentary. He's like, I am so glad I don't have to face him anymore. But it was a great seal block again. Another call, shovel pass.
Right,
it was a
that's
shovel
right.
pass
Yep.
to Lombardi, right? And typically we typically run Margiotta in motion and give him a shovel that looks almost like a jet sweep. But we came back, especially when the running back goes one way, the linebackers are going to go with them, and then we just shoveled it back to Scott. I mean,
yeah,
that's an easy seal block once you see how to go one way. And, a great call by the coach to set it up. But, not only Ryan, but that whole offensive line, they really did a great job this year. And, 3 of them are coming back next year, which will be nice.
Yeah. Nice depth there across the offensive line. And that's always important in any, forget, it doesn't matter if it's option or any other kind of football team. I always think of the offensive line as the transmission for an offense in general, right? Because if the transmission's not working, forget it. Nothing's going to happen.
I'm actually going to start my own podcast, and it's just going to be about offensive linemen because they don't get enough love. When you read press releases, you read about how the running back ran for 250. I mean, Alex Tata ran for 190 yards.
Right.
I'll tell you, he's a very good running back and has excellent balance. But we're gonna give some love to the Hogs up front. The Hogs always lead the way. Always.
Right. Yeah. All right. So 28-21 final score. The last couple of plays. It's kind of funny because we lost the stream on ESPN Plus because I think it cut off with like about a minute a little over a minute to go in the game.
You
So
actually missed some big plays. There was an
I know I had to.
interception. We believed we had an interception, and I think the kid got up so fast, left the ball on the ground. The Army guy picked the ball up, and
Uh,
they gave the ball to Army. I'm like, the game should have been over.
right,
But
right.
at the end of the day, we came out with a victory, and I tell you, hats off to Coach Matus. He really has done a great job with the culture there, the whole coaching staff.
Hmm.
These kids could not have been what a great group of kids. They worked so hard, knowing that like Ryan, that was Ryan's last game from the time he was in fourth grade.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Think
he's
about that. Yeah.
he's not gonna play football anymore. Now it's time for him to move on. But absolutely loved every moment of it, and
Hmm.
grateful for the opportunity that they got to play every game available. As an
Yeah.
athlete, that's all you want. You just want to be able to play every game that you can, right? And just not to toot Ryan's horn, but from the time that kid was in fifth grade playing football, he's played every game available but one. Made it to the
Hmm.
championship game, fifth grade year, sixth grade year, seventh grade year, eighth grade year. His ninth grade year, we lost in the state semifinals, so he missed one game. State championship, sophomore year, state championship junior year, state championship senior year. In his 4 years at Sprint, three championship games, and the COVID year they only played one game. That's all you want, man. You just want to be able to play, and the fact that he was able to stay healthy and be able to play in every game available. He knows now he can take his jersey off and say he doesn't have any regrets, right? And that's
Yeah.
really that's
Yeah.
really all you want as an athlete. And I would hope that other kids get that same opportunity. But
Yeah.
offensive linemen, toil and anonymity, get to play every game.
And to the fact that he was able to play all those games and while not sustaining a serious injury, I'm sure he got dinged up and all that kind of stuff. But it's even more remarkable because when you think about everything that's happening on the offensive line on every single play, I mean, how many times have you been watching TV and you just see some lineman get rolled up on by
Oh,
either his own guy
always,
or defender?
always.
I mean, so yeah, I mean, hats off to him for his durability. I mean, that's really really impressive. All right, so 16-0 over the course of 2 years, two championships, and three championships in the last 5 years. And I was making a comment earlier today on the Facebook group page. I said, it's the only thing better than beating Army is beating them when the championship is on the line. So that's that's always kind of cool.
But if you ask the kids, they say every time.
Yeah.
Like we ask that question when we talk to them. We're like, okay, star game or championship game? Which time would you rather beat Army? And they're always like, both times.
Oh
Both
yeah, yeah. There's no substitute for that. All right. Well, Jim, I think that's going to cover it for us. It was a really good conversation in terms of just the recap of the season and the championship game in particular. I knew that you being a coach, you could kind of bring some perspective that we don't always hear. So thank you for that. And yeah, it's great to hear that you're looking to put that podcast together. You have to keep me posted on how that goes because I'd be interested in kind of hearing that content. And are you looking more at all levels of football or focusing on collegiate?
all levels, up through professional ranks, right? I mean,
Hmm.
to gather some offensive linemen that we know that are playing now. I know some offensive line coaches in the NFL
Hmm.
that just to be able to talk to them about, what is the mentality of an offensive lineman? Most people think they're these there's some pretty smart guys out there, and it's
Yeah.
they don't get a lot of love. So it's time to give them.
Well, yeah, and it's funny too because you always hear when you're talking about football positions, you hear skilled positions. As far as I'm concerned, the way the game has evolved over time, every position to me is a skilled position because there's certain. I mean, the offensive schemes nowadays can be so complex that it's not a matter of just you know jumping up and just going toe to toe with the guy in front of you. You have to know, for any given play. Uh, you might have different responsibilities, and just being able to quickly react and process all that in the snap of a finger to me requires a heck of a lot of skill. So I think that I'm one for voting for just kind of eliminating that whole skilled versus unskilled, because as far as I'm concerned, all 11 players certainly, I'll even say on both sides of the ball.
I agree with you completely. And I will tell you, the impetus behind this is coming to the realization that if you take a look at football and, all these next gen stats and everything else, every position has a stat line except for offensive linemen.
Is that right?
Now, the stat that offensive linemen like are what they call pancakes, which is
right. Yeah.
They're on their back, right?
Yeah.
But when we graded offensive linemen, it was a very simple plus, minus, or zero, right? Did you do your job?
Mm-hmm.
Did you not do your job? Or was there a stalemate? And then we counted pancakes. So we actually, because that's what the kids liked, that we had them count their own, and then they would tell us, I had 17 pancakes, and we'd look back at the film and we'd be like, you had 2. And in your mind, you had 17, so you had a great game. And the fact of the matter is, you graded out at 96%, which is great.
Right.
But
right.
So I want to explore it a little more and give them some love and just see where it takes us. That's all.
Yeah. Well, that sounds pretty good to me. All right, Jim, thanks very much for joining us again, and looking forward to, basically seeing how things work out with Ryan in terms of service selection and beyond. So
big day on Thursday.
What's that?
This is it, Thursday.
Okay, that's when it is. Yeah, they've changed that around. Back in the day, they used to have the service selection. It was actually after the Christmas vacation. So anyway, that's kind of cool that they do it before. Yeah. So please pass along my congratulations to him, and it was great talking with you again. So we'll see you next time. Okay.
Again, Carl, I can't thank you enough for your support of Navy Sprint Football. The kids work so hard, and it's great to have them come out with another championship. So hats off to them.
Absolutely. Awesome.
All right, thank you.
All right, take care, man. Bye-bye. Bye. All right, we have our question of the day coming up next, so please don't go anywhere. All right, I appreciate you hanging with us here on Navy Sports Central, and it is now time for our question of the day. And as we normally do, let's go ahead and check out the question from our last episode. So you'll remember that we were talking with Navy sprinter Molly Mangan, and our question had to do with how many times she appeared in the record books. So here's how it went. The Navy Track and Field Record Book lists the top 10 performances in every event, and how many of the top 10 times for the 4x400 meter relay will Molly Mangan's name appear as one of the team's members? Is it 4, 5, 6, or 7 times? And in looking at the results, 50% of you went with 5 times, 30% chose 6, and 20% picked 7 times. Now, before I give the correct answer, I did want to mention that I should have been more specific with the question. Since we were focusing on the upcoming indoor track season, I was referencing Molly's performances in the indoor 4x400 meter relay event, but I didn't make that clear when I asked the question. So when Molly's father, Jim, saw the poll question, he came back and said that the number is actually 8. And he was right, because Molly was also part of 3 outdoor 4x400 meter relay teams that are in the top 10 all time. The only problem was I couldn't edit the poll question once someone responded. So for our purposes, we'll just focus on the indoor 4x400 meter relay. Now, it turns out the correct answer is 5, as you could probably figure it out from doing the math before. That means that Molly and her 4x400 meter relay teammates, Chelsea Edwards, Kara Kakashik, and Chloe Alfieri, own half of the top 10 times indoors for that event. So pretty impressive results any way you look at it. And by the way, individually, Molly also has 3 of the top 10 60-meter times indoors, as well as 5 of the top 10 best results in the 200 meters. Now, let's go ahead and move on to our question of the day for this episode. Believe it or not, the Collegiate Sprint Football League has been around since 1934. That's a total of 88 years. So our question is, how many times has Navy either shared the championship or won it outright since it joined the league in 1946? Is it 34 times, 37 times, 39 times, or 40 times? And the reason I say shared is because the title game was actually just established about 5 years ago in 2017. So there were times earlier than that where, Navy finished tied for first along with either Army or some other team in the league. All right, so I just wanted to point that out. You can think about that one for a while and get back to me with an answer. I will have that posted on the Navy Sports Nation Group Facebook page later today. If you don't happen to be a part of the group and would like to answer anyway, you can also email me at carld@navysportsnation.com. Also, please consider joining the group if you haven't already. We continue to grow every day, and I think we're closing in on 900 members now. Okay, this is where we normally have our mid-watch segment. The winter sports season is just getting going, so I will have 2 more terrific athletes for us to track from now through the end of February, starting with our next episode. I can tell you right now that we'll be featuring a couple of swimmers. The Navy men's and women's swimming and diving teams are 2 of the most consistent winning programs at the Academy, so I think it's time to shine the spotlight on them for a little while. That's going to do it for this edition of Navy Sports Central. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, if you like what you've heard, be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and remember to spread the word to all the other Navy fans out there. Once again, I'd like to thank Jim Kenneally for joining us today to recap the Navy Sprint Football Championship season. That was a really fun conversation for sure. And thanks to all of you who answered our question of the day. You can always find that on our Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page. It'll be pinned right there at the top. And just a quick reminder, the views expressed on Navy Sports Central are my own and do not reflect those of the U.S. Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. By the way, the music used in Navy Sports Central comes to you courtesy of Audio Jungle. This is a great site for purchasing the rights to use music from thousands of artists around the world, and those we feature in the podcast will be credited in our show notes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.